Now that we've explored the basics of Meta Haptics Studio, let's talk about some best practices to improve your workflow, getting you better results faster, and helping you make design choices with more deliberation and direction. First, let's start with a discussion on the importance of iteration, which is a key principle of game development. It's how a game goes from merely functioning to feeling full and complete, nuanced and engaging. Iteration is applicable to all disciplines of game dev, including haptics. Let's say you've crafted a solid first batch of haptics for your game, with powerful weapon feedback and realistic footstep textures. But during in-game testing, the strong haptics seem overbearing and compete with each other, while footsteps get lost in the ambience. This kind of experience is normal, and returning to the design phase to balance and refine is common practice throughout a game dev cycle. Resisting the urge to refine too soon and planning to replace first drafts frees you to practice quick iteration. Focus on analysis to generate drafts rapidly, then implement, test, and return to Haptic Studio with much greater insight. Before we begin, one quick tip to keep you streamlined. While preparing audio files for import, organize them into folders. When you batch import these folders, Haptic Studio will retain them as groups. Note that folder hierarchies will not be preserved, so carefully title subfolders to keep the generated group names logical. Understanding the behavior of the amplitude and frequency parameters is the key to getting quality results on the first pass. Let's start with amplitude. When pushing gain high, you'll notice the signal will clip, or max out and plateau. The result is not the same kind of audio distortion that might sound distasteful with severe clipping, but maxing out amplitude and frequency values will result in a loss of dynamics, contrast, and texture. Let's compare some clips in the Footsteps project. Stepping on concrete will be a smoother texture than, say, gravel, so let's use the resolution slider to control the amount of detail in the event. Reducing the number of breakpoints will result in smoother modulation, while a higher resolution will create more detail and a grittier texture. Also, notice how gain and resolution have an effect on emphasis detection. The emphasis parameter sensitivity is a time-saving tool for bringing out texture across an entire clip. You may achieve similar results by drawing amplitude curves, but using the emphasis values, you can broadly achieve more striking results in a fraction of the time. An emphasis point can also achieve a stronger transient than what is achievable by amplitude only. Each emphasis point can be further refined by selecting it to access the sharpness value. In this clip, the sensitivity parameter got us mostly there, but I'd like to manually add an extra emphasis point. You can select any number of breakpoints, then add emphasis from the edit menu, or use the shortcut, Command or Control plus B. Note that any manual changes you make will be overwritten when adjusting any analysis parameters again. So get as close as possible to the results you want with analysis before you commit to manual editing. Let's move on to frequency. You'll notice that both frequency parameters have a min and max value. In the audio filter parameter, these values define the frequency window or bandpass to focus on. The haptic output gives you control to apply the resulting frequency band to the desired haptic frequency range. Essentially, you're telling Haptic Studio how to map audible frequency to the vibration frequency, effectively controlling the pitch of the haptics. Let's take a look at a few examples. In this windy ambience, we've got a lot of full spectrum content. We've got some deep rumbles in the lows, howling wind in the mid-range, and some high-frequency breeze in the foliage. I want this ambience to be gentle and not bombard the player with those low rumbles. I'll use the audio filter param to edge out the lows, then move the haptic output values to focus it right where I want it. I'll also drop the gain and remove any emphasis. This is a very subtle haptic, but effective. The sound of collecting a firearm here contains a lot of mid and high frequencies from metallic mechanical parts. The automatic result gave us a very literal application, but it feels a little too lightweight. We want to feel the mass of this object as we pick it up. Let's hone into the usable part of the spectrum to unfold the detail. This already took that mid-range and dropped it down to the lower frequencies possible on the haptic device. It's already feeling much heavier. I could use haptic output to bring all of the frequencies down for more weight, but I still want to feel some of the higher clicky textures, so I'll leave it right here. I want to create a little bit more definition, so I'm going to boost the gain and resolution, as well as the sensitivity. Envelope reduction can create a bit more contrast between the attack and the rest of the envelope, but for this clip I'm going to leave it all the way down to retain the impact. These examples demonstrate a key feature of Haptic Studio's design, that it is frequency agnostic. Haptic output is not bound to the source audio frequency. This is important because haptic devices vibrate at a much narrower bandwidth than the audible frequency spectrum, and designers will have full control to bend the audio data into the limitations of the haptic hardware. Let's tie this all together with a discussion about balance. When exploring the tools in Haptic Studio, especially for the first time, it's exciting to turn things up to 11. Explosions and impacts can be fun to play with at full force. Textures of leaves underfoot can be dramatic when really amplifying them, but not everything should be dramatic. In general, you might think of haptics as a musical score in a film, existing to support the story and sometimes lead the audience, occasionally taking the spotlight when the narrative calls for it, but often having a more transparent presence to create a connection without drawing attention. Before you begin designing and throughout your project, ask yourself questions like the following to help you know where to start and where to go from there. Which interactions are important to feel? When will the use of tactile sensations magnify the experience? What will drive the narrative, increase immersion, or assist the player? Objects you can pick up and hold are a common first choice to consider. But what about non-tactile sources? You might feel a door closing in the next room, or the roar of an approaching enemy plane. Looking at this clip leads us to the next question. What does not need haptics? In the real world, we don't just hear sound, we feel it. But we certainly don't want to feel everything we hear in a game. Birds chirping, the voice and movements of an NPC, or the reloading of an enemy weapon, for example. At what point do you start to feel that approaching plane? When you first hear it, or only when it's close up? Consider that not necessarily 100% of a clip needs haptic feedback. You may want to feel the full decaying vibration of a sword, but do you need to feel the entire reverb tail of a gunshot? Before you design a single haptic, establish your intensity range. Which haptic should be the strongest and which should be the most subtle? This might be the most important consideration right before you begin, because you may want to start with designing these first. They'll serve as guideposts as you fill in the rest of your project, fitting everything into place and harmonizing together. Where can we pull back on some haptics to accentuate others? Which haptics will likely coexist? Do they blur together or are they distinct? The goal of asking these questions is to end up with a more lively and diverse palette of haptics, and to achieve clarity. When players can clearly recognize the difference between haptic events, it can empower them with greater intuition and understanding of the game mechanics. It can boost reaction speed. It could even help players to navigate the game world. Let's take a look at 3 correlating clips which will often be used together in quick succession, which means we want them to stand apart. Here I have a gunshot, a reload, and a special grenade launcher attachment. These clips are all a bit too strong and uniform, which in fact lessens their impact as a whole. Placing these in different levels, pulling down just a bit on the gunshot and a lot on the reload, allows the special attack to hit harder. I'm also going to place some of their content into different frequency bands to add more contrast and separation between them. One last tip, don't underestimate the power of haptic silence. Often, a brief pause, allowing the player's senses to rest for a moment, can be the most effective way to accentuate an event that immediately follows it. To summarize everything we've talked about in this video, get quick results by focusing on analysis rather than refining with manual editing at first, then test, and then refine and repeat. Preserve detail by not overdoing gain. Think of frequency analysis as filtering the frequency band to only the part of the audio that you want to feel, then mapping it to a haptic frequency range. Create more variety through amplitude texture and by diversifying frequency output from clip to clip, especially with coexisting events. Use creative restraint and consider the give and take, whether it's by filtering out unwanted frequencies, cleaning up envelopes, or even omitting haptics entirely. Be deliberate in choosing what the player needs to feel to get the most out of the experience. For more information about all of the topics discussed in this video, you can find links to learning resources in the description below.